she was bound and determined that she would get the toy she wanted, no matter what. Even with a soul-piercing wail, she cried out, but to no avail. Her mother would not succumb. And I was standing in line, waiting to check out, and I watched the power play between mother and what appeared to be a 5-year-old daughter. I wondered who will win. The little girl seemed to be running out of steam as she quieted down just a little bit. And then as she quieted down, she was able to utter, "You're breaking my heart." Not batting an eye, the mother replied, "Good." The pitiful yowling resumed. However, I had to smile, and even thinking back on it makes me chuckle. Because this little girl goes, "You're breaking my heart." Where did that come from in a 5-year-old child? Indeed, there are all sorts of emotions and feelings attributed to the heart. But we are ready to recognize that the heart spoken of when speaking out about emotions or feelings is not the pumping organ that beats somewhere between 70 and 80 times per minute and, is truly an amazing engineering marvel. It weighs about 11 ounces, the human heart, and a healthy heart is capable of pumping 2,000 gallons of blood through about 60,000 miles of blood vessels and capillaries each and every day. It is said that the heart carries enough energy in a day to drive a truck 20 miles. If the heart malfunctions, the entire body is placed in the gravest of peril. Solomon writes in Proverbs 4 and verse 23, "Watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life." The word heart, as it is oft used in the scriptures, is making reference to the inner man and the reflective seat of one's intellect, the emotion, and the will. Peter talked about, "Let it be the hidden person of the heart," in 1 Peter 3 and verse 4. In essence, the heart is the core of who we are and what direction we will chart for the course of our life. Therefore, when one reads about the necessity to watch over your heart with all diligence, it makes perfect sense. But there are times when it is extremely challenging to keep an eye on your heart. The great and foremost commandment, as Jesus stated, is, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." That's found back in Matthew, the 22nd chapter, and verse 37. It is clearly foundational and will be seen in the comportment of life, as expressed by Jesus, and as Luke records, in the 6th chapter, verse 45. "The good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil. For the mouth speaks that which fills the heart." So everything that we do, the full comportment, reveals what's going on with the heart. Now the word heart is referred to 118 times in the New Testament. And more often than not, it is urging the reader to engage in a spiritual exercise, often with a view to strengthen the heart in order to withstand the onslaught of all that life presents. Consider Hebrews, the 12th chapter, the first 3 verses, which reads as follows: "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance, the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him, enduring the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart." We don't want to do anything to lose heart. Proverbs again, 21st chapter, verse 2. "Every man's way is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. It is so vital to keep an eye on one's heart, to make certain that it remains in proper rhythm. And let us not lose heart in doing good. For in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary, is how Paul began to conclude his letter to the Galatians in the 6th chapter and verse 9. And life does demand so much from us on a day-by-day basis. And yes, it can become wearisome. And it is pivotal for one to take care of the heart, of the inner man, of who we are. While the urgency of physical life pulls at us, and we know that so much now after the last several months we've gone through, and we know that we're going to be facing some hard times coming up. But especially with the virus and the pandemic and one thing after another, after another, after another, we're being torn apart. But we have to pay attention to the consequences of neglecting the proper care of the spiritual heart. If one isn't careful, it can very well lead to spiritual heart disease, which is characterized by the following: unwillingness to grant forgiveness. When we are directed to grant forgiveness, but we're unwilling to do it. And that's found in Colossians the 3rd chapter and verse 13, and Ephesians 4 and verse 32. Becoming envious of one another. And envy is classified as being worse than wrath and anger, according to what Solomon writes back in the book of Proverbs. Embracing an attitude of ingratitude. We need to take time to stop and appreciate how truly blessed we are. Paul begins his letter to the church in Ephesus in the 1st chapter and verse 3 talking about that aspect. There'd be the lack of true contentment. And Paul indicated he had learned to be content in whatever circumstances he found himself in the latter part of the Philippian letter. We become more fearful. Because see, what perfect love does is perfect love cast out fear. And that's what we want. We want fear cast out. So all of those things, when we have those things happening within us, are indicators of we've got some spiritual heart problems. We know and we pay attention to the various things that come across the line and through our doctor's offices when we have issues with our physical heart. Well, you got to watch your cholesterol level. You need to get more exercise. Your heart rate is not in the correct rhythm, and you know you've got various things going on. And so you're told, pay attention. Don't eat as much salt, and do this and do that. Throughout the scriptures, we're challenged to pay attention to the heart. And we need to make attention. To make that directed thought and put attention directly squarely on the heart. Now, these are just a few of those things that would be indicative of spiritual heart disease. Some others would include arrogance, distrust, overt anxiety and worry, hatred, even of a subtle nature, discouragement, frustration, prejudice, impatience. All could be added to the list. The bottom line is seen in learning to keep an eye on our heart, for truly from it flows the springs of life.